Welcome to A State of Mind, the podcast that brings together consciousness, meditation, mindfulness, psychology, psychedelics, and so much more in pursuit of this mystery we call life. This is Julian Royce. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Before we get to today's episode and conversation, a few announcements. First, there is a really fascinating study that's being done on the relationship between psychedelics and meditation. And there is no experience with psychedelics required to participate. However, they are looking for people with a regular meditation practice to participate. So I mentioned this on a previous episode, but if you have been meditating consistently for the last year or so, you can participate in this study, and you can find it online at ways-of-looking.com. And that'll be linked in the show notes below. If you go there and tell them you heard about it from a State of Mind podcast, I'd appreciate it. And Marco Schlosser, who's one of the lead scientists with that, will be on the podcast in the near future. So look out for that. There's a lot of exciting research happening in this field, and I think this study in particular is quite interesting. Another thing I wanted to mention is about a year and a half ago, we had Corwin on the podcast, and he started this organization called Tiny Temples, which we discussed in that episode. Well, first I should tell you a little bit. I mean, they make these amazing spaces. They make tiny homes for people, and they also make little spaces that can be used for meditation or for healing. And oftentimes their creations are really works of art. They're very beautiful. And I'm getting involved with a project creating a space that's going to feature mandalas from the Medicine Buddha lineage, I believe, as well as some other sacred geometry and art. And I look forward to sharing more about that project here and with video and photo on the YouTube channel. So check that out, Tiny Temples. I'll link that below and here too. So today I'm speaking with Janis Dochterman. Janis is a friend and colleague, and I really appreciated having her on. I appreciate just being in her presence. I really get a sense of how she empowers people she sees and works with to open up to their own creative process. And like we talked about in this conversation, creativity is really something that I think we all have innately as human beings. And, we see that with children, right? And then as we get older, through conditioning and through whatever forces, we tend to lose that creative, inspiring spark. In my own life, while I am not an art therapist, I do use some techniques from art therapy with people sometimes, including drawing mandalas, which I learned about through studying Jungian psychology. And it can be fascinating what that brings up, what it reveals, what it shows, and how, in my own life experience, dance and movement, as well as drawing, painting, and of course music, I play guitar, engaging with all those things has really helped me to open up a sense of inspiration in myself at times. I think when we engage in creativity and can let go of the judgment and just kind of let it flow and play and have fun with it, there can be an inspiration that comes there, and then that can be channeled or applied or felt in other areas of our life as well. There is an annoying noise at the beginning of our conversation. I apologize for that. It was my dog chewing on a chew toy, and it goes away after about 5 minutes. So please don't let that stop you from listening to the whole thing. Janis has a lot of great offerings, one of which is a organization she started called We Wild. And it's led by several women, and it's all about empowering women, and they're doing retreats. That is also linked below, so check that out. And in fact, Samantha Emmett, who was also on the podcast previously, is a member of We Wild, one of the teachers or facilitators there. And I just wanted to mention the podcast episode I did with Samantha. It was number 58, and it was about her experience and her experience of abuse with a spiritual teacher named Ratu Bagus. And it's become one of the most listened to episodes that we have put out. And I've heard from some folks out there who really appreciate the teachings and community of Ratu, which I believe is in Bali. And so I'm not dismissing those. I really appreciated having Samantha on. I think that, my personal opinion is that human beings are complex and many things can be true. And so I have no doubt that his teachings and his community have benefited people. And I also really appreciated Samantha sharing her story, where her relationship with him actually turned abusive. And so, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that we have to throw out or disregard whatever else that's good and positive that's come from that community and from that teacher and teachings. So I just wanted to mention that. And if you guys have sent me a message, I read all those. I listen to them. So you're not speaking into the void here. So to get back to today's conversation with Janis, she really shares with us a lot about her own process. She shares with us 2 spoken word poems that she wrote, and I really appreciated her sharing those. I think that, like we talk about in this conversation, creativity is a natural human impulse that we all have. And then for whatever variety of reasons, many of us lose touch with that. I think it's easy for us to see that children have that. They're just naturally creative and expressive. And then as we get older and become an adult, we often learn ways to tamp that down. Some of that is appropriate to be, a mature functioning adult. But there's a cost to that. And so it can be so healing and empowering to rediscover your own creativity. And you can really do that at any age. And in my own life, I have found things like drawing and painting, in an abstract way, or sometimes not so abstract, dance and movement, and of course music. I play guitar. Like, to be able to let myself play with those things without judging myself and without the expectation that I'm trying to create something that I'm going to publish or share with the world. I really value entering creative spaces like that. There's an inspiration that can be unlocked there that I think is so valuable that can then translate into other areas of your life. So I hope that this conversation can help you to open up to your own inner inspiration. I really believe that that's something that's within all of us, and we can discover it within. It doesn't have to depend on external circumstances. So without further ado, I bring you Janis Dochterman. And I'm here today with Janis Dochterman. Janis, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And you are a fellow Naropa graduate working as a therapist, but not just a therapist, an art therapist, right?
Yes, I am. An expressive arts therapist,
Nice.
Which is a little bit different from an art therapist.
What's the difference?
So art therapy, there's, 2 theories or 2 forms of art therapy. It's art as therapy or art psychotherapy, which was what I was trained in at Naropa. But since I graduated from Naropa, I've added to my training, and now I can call myself an expressive arts therapist, which means I bring in all the modalities of art, so not just visual arts, but music, dance, poetry.
Oh, cool. So any kind of creative expression? Interesting. Yeah. How would that show up in practice, like in actuality? Like, would you have someone with art supplies, like, creating with you?
It really depends on what the client is needing. It depends on who I'm working with and what they're needing. Each session can look different. And it depends on what the client's language is. Like, they come to me and they're like, oh, I really enjoy painting. Then I would want to bring in painting as much as possible and combine that with, traditional talk therapy, mindfulness, meditation, or whatever other, practices I think would be most beneficial for that client.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did you get, I guess one of the things that we were going to talk about is like how you came to choose this path.
Yeah.
It's a big question. But.
Yeah. There's lots of things that led me to this work. I think one of the things that I really wanted to share with you, going back to that question of like, what does the work look like? I wanted to share with you a spoken word, which is actually a form of expressive arts therapy that I personally did, around like, well, what does that look like? What does that magic look like when you're in the room with the client? And so right now I'm working on a personal project called the Alchemy of Art Therapy.
Oh, cool.
And it's going to be an art exhibition, mostly photography. It's going to be a self-portrait of me as an art therapist, but it's a statement of advocacy around how expressive arts therapy can be magical and transformational for so many people. Yeah. So is now a good time to share that?
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine art exhibition a couple years from now. There's going to be a bunch of different photographs of me in different costumes, which is also another form of expressive arts therapy having to do with drama.
Like getting dressed up and... Cool.
Yeah, getting dressed up and like trying on different archetypes. And so each section of the spoken word that I'm going to share with you is an archetype, a role that I step into as an art therapist in relationship with my client. Yeah. So there'll be images of me in these archetypes, and then you'll hear this spoken word kind of overlapping those images.
Cool.
Okay. I am an alchemist and art therapist. Some may even call me warrior goddess. My passion is to be in service and inspire you to grow, but before I can, I must first be curious about my own shadow. I live in my own practices in order to shine the light on the path before us to meet you exactly where you're at. You are the leader of your journey. I am merely a guide along the way. Our bond is the catalyst for healing and calling in the Fae. I invite you to listen, feel, and follow your imagery as it shares with you exactly how to be. Together, let us discover what happens when intuition and imagination combine. This is where our inner alchemist meets the divine. I ask you to explore your darkness. Know that you are not alone in this. I honor the light and dark within all of us. I hold space for difficult emotions to breathe. My gift to you is a creative tool that cuts through dis-ease. I often hold up mirrors so you can see your strengths. Sometimes we just need reminders of our brilliance. So here are secrets everyone shall know. Where our intention goes, energy will flow. Alchemy is just transmuting energy, such as emotion, energy in motion. This happens in the present moment through movement of our bodies, opening of our hearts, training of our minds, and alignment with our soul. I hope you feel inspired now to choose from this creation the Alchemist Art Therapy Transformation.
That's beautiful. I like how you had some rhymes in there. It was nice.
Yeah, it's fun to play around with poetry and also expressing outwardly, which is, spoken word in itself is like the performance of poetry. And so that's kind of part of my own personal process around, well, what does it mean to be an art therapist, and what does happen in session with my clients, which is magic.
Now you have that to answer the question. What was the process of writing that like? Was it like kind of like stream of consciousness, like one time, or did you go back and kind of work with it?
Well, what I've really been discovering about my own creative process is in order to get into the flow, where that flow state, meaning where I feel energetically open enough to receive information, I'm usually in a state where I'm relaxed, I'm tapped into my senses, I'm tapped into my surroundings, and I just listen. I just listen for what wants to be spoken. And for this particular spoken word, I created the imagery first. So I had this idea of, it all started with one image actually, of this woman, and I wasn't envisioning it me at first, but it was this woman who had like a dark face and kind of like shadows around her. And it just reminded me of the process of like, you know, being with clients. I have to do my own work before I can really show up for them. So I have to explore my own shadow and work through my own challenges to really show up and be present with my clients. So it started from that image and then turned into a whole other lot of images. And then I wrote the words came after the images.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like how you mentioned like listening, like kind of being present and listening and something moving through you or something coming through. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not always like that. Sometimes it just comes, and sometimes I'm not relaxed and listening. But
well, are you normally creating visual art? Is that your? For some reason, that's what I had in my head.
You know, well, right now this is my current project. Is this like self-portrait photography, spoken word exhibition, which I also wanted to be interactive. And I'm a couple years out still from finishing this project because I still need to shoot with a photographer and put all of the, you know, logistical things together. But I've explored lots of different mediums of art. Yeah, so dance is one of my favorites. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So is it more about the process for you then than the medium or the final product? Yeah, I like that. It's all about the process rather than the end product. Beautiful. Yeah. Was there a moment in your life where you felt like you knew that you wanted to become like a therapist or healer or work with people in that way? Yeah. There's a lot of moments that kind of linked up to make this train. I like the imagery that's coming to me is like, you know, there was this moment, which then led to that moment, which then led to that moment, and then the momentum of the train kept going until I found this career. But the first memory that I have was when I lost my mom when I was 7 to lung cancer. And when my guardian parents took me in, they invited me to go to this expressive arts camp called Camp Amanda, which was in Iowa, where I lived at the time. And that was my first kind of introduction to expressive arts as a healing tool. And then also groups, right? Like bringing together a community of people that have similar challenge to be able to, you know, express themselves and talk about it. Yeah, well, it's a huge thing when you're 7 years old. And wow. Yeah. So I just remember like being able to express myself there because I was having a challenge expressing myself, which I want to share more about in a little bit when I get into maybe more of like my personal story and how I got to where I am now. But yeah, I was having a hard time expressing myself, and my parents recognized that, and they were like, we got to do something. So they took me to this camp, and that was my first introduction. That's cool. And then after that, it was my Aunt Dawn, who I like to call Art Dawn, because during the holidays, we would go to Aunt Dawn's, and we'd always make art, including like Bob Ross paintings. Oh, really? And I always had a hard time expressing myself amongst my family, but it was always so comforting to go to my Aunt Dawn's because there was always art, and I could always have that outlet. Yeah. Wait, so you did Bob Ross paintings? Yeah. Did they look anything like his? Because whenever I've never really tried that hard, but I'm always like, this guy is amazing. Like, how is he? Yeah. You know, like, it's like a tree, and then there's a mountain, and there's a lake, and like, I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Yes. He's incredible, and his voice is like so soothing. Like, he really is an inspiration. He's an amazing guy, yeah. For the work that I do now, because I've gotten a couple of comments like, oh, especially when I'm reading meditation, like, your voice is so calming. I'm like, yeah, thanks to Bob Ross. There was this amazing article, it was either like New York Times or the New Yorker, and it was like a long thing, and it was like this journalist searched to find his paintings, because he died however many years ago, and
no one knew where they were, and they finally found them in this giant warehouse. And now he's like, you know, kind of becoming famous again. Like, you know, not that he ever wasn't famous, but they're big collector's items. And so I think they're gonna auction them off eventually.
Wow.
Yeah, he found them on this like air conditioning warehouse in like Connecticut or somewhere random.
Yeah. How special.
Yeah.
It's really special. Yeah. So that was, you know, so Bob Ross and Art Dawn were those moments of connection to kind of lead me on my path. And then the last thing that I'll mention is there was a moment where I was really struggling and I ended up moving to California and to find myself. And I found this author named Sark, Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy. Huh. And she has a series of books that she's authored. And she's like this eccentric woman who lives like in this tiny little cottage in San Francisco. And I just felt like I had a connection with her. And her books are all about, you know, self-love and healing from the inside out and expressive arts. And like all the books she wrote is like in her handwriting, and she has doodles, and it just, she was a big inspiration, especially this book that she wrote called How to Make Your Creative Dreams Real or Come True. I forget exactly the title. But that book is really what kind of set me on the path that I am now.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So that really affected you and impacted you.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet her?
No. I probably could, though, if I, like, reached out. She's still alive and I think living in San Francisco.
Okay.
Last time I checked, yeah. That would be really neat, actually.
Do you want to say her name again? That was an unusual name.
Yeah, Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy. And for short, it's Sark.
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 Or Sark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I think this creative impulse is often, you know, children have it, right? Or they tap into it, and we all get to do art class, or at least most of us, I think, in like elementary school. At least I did. But then, you know, as you get older, it's kind of like the tree is like dying, and you're like, got to go to work and live your life, and everyone always tells you can't make a living doing art or music, and I don't know. I feel like this story I'm saying now I've heard so many times before, and there's a truth to it, and some people really stake their identity as a musician or an artist, and good for them. And then, you know, obviously most people don't. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think what you're speaking to is like this creative impulse that we all have, and we can find different ways. Like it could be cooking, or you know, maybe like with some of the stuff so many people are doing on Instagram now is a kind of way to do that. You know, you take a photo and you write a little poem, and then you tag 300 other people, and then you you know, that's like ways to be creative. That's part of being human. Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing that I recently discovered about the word creative versus expressive is, you know, creativity can actually feel really intimidating. Like when people are, you know, approach me and ask me what I do, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not an artist. And I gently remind people, like, in order to do this work and for it to be effective, you don't have to be an artist. And so taking the creativity out of it, it is very creative, but for people that feel intimidated about this work, taking the word creative out of it and putting in expressive, because some people can connect more with, oh yeah, like I want to be expressive, or I want to learn how to express myself more fully, more aligned, and more confidence. And there's all creative ways of doing that. So that felt important to name. Yeah.
There's less maybe stigma or weight around it as an idea.
Yeah, it seems like maybe an easier entry point for some people. Yeah, a lot, and especially people who have lower self-esteem, who don't feel that they're creative, or don't feel like they're talented. Like I was definitely one of those people. I did not think I was creative or talented, and yet here I am, like expressive arts therapist, like leading other people on how to really tune in and tap into, well, how do you want to express yourself in this lifetime?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like, a lot of times, people get the idea like, oh, I'm a terrible artist or I can't draw. But I do think that creative energy is in all of us. I mean, certainly we're all expressive. Like if you're breathing, you're expressing something.
Yeah. Yes.
It's so interesting how some people, like I think of someone like Kanye West, like it just seems like there's never a moment that he has any doubt that whatever it is he's thinking or imagining or creating is worth like sharing with everyone. And maybe he does, but some people just seem like they naturally have a certain confidence, or and that's not always a good thing. I mean, it's good to be able to think sometimes before you talk, or like evaluate what you're doing. But I think a lot of people relate to what you're just saying, and I do myself too. It's like so self-critical and self-negative, and never want to put anything out there at all. That's probably the more the majority of people.
Yeah, it's scary to put yourself out there. And then there's also that other part of, the healing aspects of putting ourselves out there.
Like taking that risk.
Yeah. And not necessarily out to the whole entire world, but, like, I'm just thinking about this right here and how healing this is for me, just to be able to share part of my story with you for the first time with anyone.
Oh, that's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah. Like, this is really healing for me, and it doesn't matter how many other people witness it. Like, just being witnessed by you in this moment is super healing. And I get to express this part of me that I've never been able to before. Yeah. Or no one's ever been like, hey, like, that interested, So, yeah.
It really makes me, I'm glad you said that. It makes me appreciate the podcast format. Like, part of why I do this, and why I love the medium of like long conversation that's recorded, and it is shared publicly, but it's like a very comfortable space here, so it's like not in front of a live audience, not a live broadcast. And then it kind of sometimes makes me think about like a nature documentary where they set up a camera like in the jungle or the savannah or wherever it is, Arctic wilderness, and then they like disguise it in like a tree stump or something. And so after a while, all the animals, like, they don't notice it. And then they can be natural. But then if a human like walked by, they would all hide.
Yep.
But then if you wait however many hours, they start coming out.
Yeah.
I think we have that in us too. Like, if we feel very comfortable and relaxed, and then all of a sudden this like other parts of our personality can come out, and we can express so much more. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's actually an ancient teaching around from meditation in India of like, because you're kind of sitting there being with your thoughts, and it's like, don't look too intently or too intensely at your mind or your thoughts, because it'll scare them away, like wild animals in the jungle. So you have to like really relax, and then the thoughts feel more safe to come out. And then you can actually see them, for what they are. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I'm going to take a moment to just like feel that in my body. Yeah.
When you were going to share like more about your life story, is that?
Yeah.
It's a desire for you?
Yeah. Okay. It is. Yeah, it is.
So you already shared a good bit. I mean, your parents, your mom died, you said, when you were 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Sharing our journeys can be so personal, and as an expressive arts therapist, I go to the expressive arts to navigate it, to seek healing, to seek growth. And so, starting your own business, so my business, Creative Conscious Connections, my private practice, I've been doing a lot of, business coaching this year. And one of the things that they invited me to do is write like a brand story. And typically it's done like in a very advertisement kind of way.
Like the story of your company or?
Yeah, like, when you stand up in front of networking events and they're like, tell us your story in 3 minutes or something, you know? And for me, like, that brought up a lot of stress. And so when I sat down to kind of tell my story, it came through as a spoken word.
Nice.
spoken word has been my like jam over the last couple of years, which has been really exciting. Yeah. And so I have written a spoken word to tell more about my journey of how I got here as a healer, and also segue into how I got inspired to create this women's program called Rewild that I started last year.
Yeah.
So is now a good time to share that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me think about if there's anything else I want to share.
So this was written in response to the story of your brand, so to speak, or of your...
This was written to share on my website because I wanted to share a part of my story with potential clients. I wanted them to know more about who they're like signing up to work with, who they're signing up to have a relationship with, as a way of inspiring others to just walk into the relationship and be vulnerable. And also to let them know, like, I'm not this person to put on a pedestal. I'm a human being just like everyone else, and I've had my own struggle. I don't have everything figured out as a therapist. And then I'm in this journey with them.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. Like, you know, going to see a therapist, entering into that relationship is so personal and vulnerable. I mean, ideally, that's what it moves towards and becomes more and more of. So it makes, I mean, there can be such a divide between what, you know, the person in the client role is sharing versus the therapist. So it's cool that you want to, put that out there and, like, let them see more of you, you know?
Yeah.
And not be perfectionist about it.
Yeah, and like, as you know, as therapists, we have to be careful about how transparent we are, because it's always in the benefit of the client, like how much to share.
Good angle to look at it at.
And like, it's hard to build a relationship without vulnerability and without like universality of like connection, of like the connection point.
Totally.
So part of my intention for writing this part of my story is like an invitation for specifically women out there to be like, oh yeah, like I identify with that part of her story. Maybe she would be a really good person to connect with. You know?
Totally.
And the trust, like there's trust there. There's trust built when you share some of your story, and people can walk into that relationship, you know, maybe with a little bit more trust. Yeah.
Yeah, more knowing of who you are, you know, as a person.
Yeah. Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready. So just so you know, this is the first time that I've shared it with anyone else besides my We Wild group.
Oh, cool.
Which I'll share more about later.
Awesome.
And there is a form of this on my website, but I don't think it's gotten a lot of views yet. So so maybe that'll change now.
Yeah.
Okay. Expressive arts therapist, yes. I am also an alchemist. I help transmute energy intentionally, creatively into the magic that we all want to be. But this gift didn't always come naturally. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." I haven't always understood this clue. Sometimes we are destined to learn the hard way. But how is it that no matter what path we choose, we still end up okay? Now here is the space where I choose to be vulnerable, not because I want your pity, but instead to inspire you. Born in the same bed I was conceived in, 3 years later my dad left and I felt abandoned. I have many siblings, but raised an only child by my mom until lung cancer took her life and she was gone. Death, loss, abandonment, all within the first 7 years, my life began with a lot of tears. Except for my own, I held them in, struggling to express, always trying to be my best. However, the challenge with this was the grief I suppressed turned into a whole lot of other problems to stress. Anxiety, learning disabilities, tic disorder, PTSD. I found myself living in a world where I was perceived as diseased. My guardian parents got me help, and it's because of them I found the arts, but my chaos doesn't end here. Really, this is where it starts. Like many teens, I was just looking for a place to belong, and drugs and alcohol became my song. The most difficult tune to choose is booze, because as some of you know, sometimes it just brings more blues. Then college came. Unhealthy coping skills plus low self-esteem. I didn't know how to use my voice, so I used my body instead, and the attention I got really went to my head. How do we feel so invincible until the moment we wake up next day feeling strung out and wondering why our body is in disarray? This is not okay. Then rock bottom hit, coked out, college dropout, my future not looking bright. Here is my wound, God. Where is the light? The Phoenix teaches us we must first burn to rise. If only we were taught at a young age that we are also this wise. With no money, I moved from Iowa to California to find myself, and this is where it all changed. I began building my self-love, and many new skills were obtained. I became fed up with feeling worthy only because of my looks, so I decided to return to the books. There was a new door opening, and it was up to me to walk through, because as the empowered woman says, it all begins and ends with you. I discovered the expressive arts as a healing tool, and that reaching out for help is actually cool. I learned about others by traveling and immersing myself culturally, then inspired my passion for psychology. I chose my mission to continue healing and growing through creativity and expression, and became a student of my own intuition. Nearing 40, I'm a different kind of wild. A woman who lives in her intuition, love, dance, and expression. I now use my voice, my art, and my story to empower other women. My vision for this community is to create a sacred space so you can be your wild, sensual self without sacrificing your health. So that you can share your innate wisdom, decrease suffering, and not feel alone. This program was birthed from my journey of suffering to resiliency, being isolated to finding community, feeling blocked to tapping into my creativity, being sexualized to reconnecting with my sensuality. I still struggle sometimes with anxiety, my fear of failure and not being good enough take over, and I need just as many reminders to just be. So together, let's step into a creative conscious connection. This is your invitation.
I love that. I liked what you said at the beginning about alchemy, and transmuting. And then, that was a lot. You're chewed a lot. It's like the kind of drugs and alcohol is a way that we often try to be wild, right? To find that wildness, that natural energy, that lack of self-consciousness, that expressiveness, creativity, connection, like we look there for it, and to find a way to do that that's healthy, that honors our body, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think as teens, and I see this a lot with my teen clients, like teens seek those peak experiences. You know, like when we took transpersonal counseling with Carla.
Who was on the podcast, episode number 1.
Yay! Oh my gosh, I love her.
Yeah.
You know, we learned all about like these heightened peak experiences, and as teens, like we seek that adventure.
We're wanting novelty and something different, and
and you know, I'm seeing a increase of, you know, psychedelics actually, because they're just like searching for that peak experiencing. But you know what? It's interesting because when I think about this, I actually think about a quote by Joseph Campbell that goes something like, I don't believe that people are searching for the meaning of life as much as they're searching for experiences of how to feel alive. And I mean, that brings me back to like why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I want to create more natural peak experiences for people to really tap into the flow state of the expressive arts so that they can have that natural high. Not like, I mean, I love psychedelics and I love my own personal experience with psilocybin and you know, what I always, you know, recommend is like, how can we find those states naturally when our brains are still developing, and then, you know, segue into that once our brains are fully developed and we're ready to kind of take those next level of, you know, those peak experiences or that like natural flow state.
I love that.
And really about like it's really about being alive and like tapping into your senses and like feeling that aliveness.
Right. Yeah. Like rather than finding like the answer to whatever the thing is, like actually being alive. And it's interesting how I think, and this is a big subject, but our modern life gives us so much comfort, and maybe part of the cost of that is that feeling of aliveness. Like, you know, our routine, our habits, our comfort, our entertainment.
Which just dawned on me, like, are all kind of external things that we're trying to bring in to make us feel alive. And what I'm really passionate is about helping people find it within themselves and then bringing it out. To find that aliveness.
Like be more of a generator instead of a consumer.
Yeah.
You know, like being more of a participant.
Yeah.
That was a big thing that I got at Burning Man when I went. It's like it was like, you know, usually when you go to like a festival or a concert or something, there's like the thing that everyone there is there to see. You know, Michael Jackson or whatever it is.
I love Michael Jackson.
I know, I wish I could see him in concert. But at Burning Man, it was like there was no thing. Like everyone was the thing. Everyone was it, and like they were all a part of it. It was all being created by everyone there. So there's just this amazing invitation to create and share and be generous, and that kind of attitude is so powerful. Yeah, and then I mean, to like leave that space and come back into the normal world, like there's no reason. That's what we're doing here too. Like we are all creating this together. We tend to think that there's some powerful group of people that control everything, and I don't think it's like that. I think we're all doing it. Like we're all people, we're all milling around, living our lives, you know.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying your perspective on that. Yeah. We're co-creating right now.
Yeah, co-creating. Yeah, exactly. So the We Wild is with women specifically.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to that part of it? Like why?
Yeah. So We Wild stands for Women Empowering Women via Intuition, Love, Dance, and Expression.
Wow.
And it's a community of women that I have started gathering. And the specific program that I'm offering right now is an 8-week deep dive online. And it combines the power of feminine connection, deep dive, like discussion, conversations, mindfulness, meditation practices, as well as, you know, some yoga, some light work, and then we bring in the expressive arts. And
So would this be like a retreat kind of?
Yeah. So there's 8 weeks. It's we meet on Thursdays from 6:30 to 8:30 for 8 weeks, and not straight, but we meet for 6 weeks, and then we take a break to do creative art exploration, and then we meet the last 2 weeks. And it's not just with me; it's with 4 other facilitators.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So it's me who's leading it, but then I have Lauren Pass Erickson, who is a dance movement therapist, and I have Lauren Pass Erickson, Lindsay Aronson, who is a sex and relationship coach, and Samantha Emmett, who's
on the podcast,
a vocal empowerment coach, and then Amy the Lovely, who's a sensual sovereignty coach.
Oh,
and so we're kind of combining all of our expertise and offering this gem of a program to women to really tune into their own creative dreams and what's blocking them from really stepping into that.
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
So like a lot around like sensuality and getting in touch with that. It's powerful work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Samantha was great on the podcast, and that's become one of, if not the most watched episodes. So yeah.
Samantha's wonderful. I feel like so grateful to have her on my team. My Wee Wild team. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting.
She's taught me a lot about my own vocal empowerment. Yeah. And
there's so
much that I like started exploring my voice a lot this year. Like, and I got my own set of Tibetan bowls, or not Tibetan bowls, crystal singing bowls and a drum. Okay. And for the first time ever, like I can actually feel like I can be a creator of music.
Oh, cool.
And you know, as an expressive arts therapist, this is really healing because before the year, like I haven't considered myself a musician, but now like I feel like I can really say that, like, yeah, like I'm making music, and I'm not for anyone else yet, but I'm creating these sound baths for me, and I've started singing, and Samantha's helped me kind of unlock that part of
that's powerful.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like an energetic component to that, right? Like your throat chakra, your voice, like opening that up.
Yeah.
That's
cool. Yeah, and that's what a lot of what the program is about, Wee Wild is about, is kind of unlocking those parts of ourselves that are blocked so that we can find that flow of energy that it takes to really align with your creative purpose in life.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And each of them, you know, each of the facilitators have been my teachers. You know, like Lauren is so magical around how to bring movement and dance, you know, because I think about trauma, for example, like trauma, like when we try and heal trauma, we think about healing it with our brain, but really trauma happens on a body level, and so we have to go back to the body to really heal trauma. And so Lauren brings that dance and movement piece of really tapping in with the body and the movement and what it needs to express to fully, like, you know, heal trauma or certain challenges.
I'm glad that you're including dance and movement. I think that's so powerful. I've seen people have like traumatic releases, like just releasing through dance and movement like that. And like all of a sudden like tears are coming and everything, and like totally unexpected to them. But it's true, we store things in our body, and you know, our nervous system goes through our whole body. Like it actually makes sense, I think, if we study the science of it. It's not just all up here. Yeah.
Do you study Peter Levine?
Yeah, a little bit. I read some of his books.
I just started his somatic experiencing training.
Yeah.
And it's incredible so far. And learning how the body needs to move and shake and express itself in order to really heal itself. There was something else that came up that I wanted to share about that, but I lost it. That's fine.
I have this interest in different cultures, like, you know, like anthropology, and so part of my mind always goes to like how different that might show up in different cultures versus what's universally true, like for the human species, you know, biologically. Like my family, I have a lot of family from England, you know, like and it's like kind of famous for being like a reserved culture where they're not very outwardly expressive. You know, like a tremendous amount could be expressed with, you know, like they stiff upper lip kind of thing, just like raising an eyebrow, or, you know, there's a lot that would go unsaid. I mean, that's the kind of stereotype, but there's truth to it. So I think that had a big impact on this country, you know, like Puritans and migrants from Europe. And so I think a lot of psychology, like if you look at Freud in the beginning, was about expressing the stuff that hadn't been expressed, like letting it move through you, like not being so repressed. And then with the 60s, there was kind of an explosion of that. Like that was like, you know, and then we saw the kind of extreme of that where people could become so open and expressive. It could actually be, you know, there's some lines there, like to be able to control yourself, like control yourself in certain situations and in certain contexts, and there's a time and place for things. And so, but I wonder, like, I don't, you know, maybe it's impossible to really answer questions like this fully, but like other cultures and how, what we might see as someone, oh, that person's finally opening up their voice and expressing themselves, like could be inappropriate in a different cultural context, for example.
Absolutely.
You know, it's just like such a spectrum, like. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, you know, in the work that we do, it's like we have to meet the needs of the person and their culture. Because I see it going both ways. I see it going the way of expressing yourself as not okay, which is still happening in a lot of different cultures around the world, specifically for women. Right.
In the way that they dress, and the way that they talk, and the way that their mannerisms are. And then I see kind of the opposite, you know, that's not accepted in our culture, which is like something that I've always wanted to go do, is like be part of the grieving rituals in like Africa. I don't know if you know much about those, and I don't know all that much, but what I do know is that they grieve in community. And it's very outward expressed. Like you dance together, you wail together, you like make music together, you cry together. And I, you know, you know this, but I lost Bebe, my dog, a couple months ago. And the only thing that helped me kind of move that trauma of that experience, because she was the love of my life, was I turned on African drumming music and I just like went wild. I just went wild, and my partner just witnessed me in that, and it was beautiful. And but that's not accepted in our culture, to just go be in a community and like dance and wail. I mean, I guess in Boulder, it's a little bit more open, but in general in the United States, like you don't hear that.
It wouldn't be considered appropriate at a funeral for most people in this country.
Exactly.
So like really. I mean, you could cry, I guess, but you're describing something that's a lot more expressive. And like including movement, that's definitely not part of our culture traditionally. I was moving and yelling and screaming and wailing and moved a lot of energy that, you know, if I hadn't expressed that, it would still be stuck, and then it would show up as... released, and that's beautiful. It was beautiful. Oh, it's tough to lose a dog. So you guys
and it also gave me an opportunity to experience grief in a different way, and that only like helps me in my work with my clients. Clients,
like I'm hearing like more acceptance of like letting yourself really feel it. Seems like one of those things, like you can't, you know, force it either. Like you could have a loss and feel kind of numb for a while, and then it could come up later. That can be a whole part of therapy. I feel like it's getting in touch with feelings that it's often not a conscious decision, like, okay, now I'm going to put all these feelings under the rug and not feel them.
Yeah.
But so a lot of people, myself included, like, we're not even aware that that's happened, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think about
and numbing is such, like, for me, it's like it was such a protective factor too. Like, I wasn't like, personally, and also what I've experienced with clients is like they're just not ready to sit with that and to look at it, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to be numb. It's okay to cut it off and until there's an opening of like, well, maybe I'll explore a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And that is so brilliant and so courageous and so protective.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
It's good to not force it or rush it and to trust the natural process that can happen.
Yeah.
And then maybe sometimes it's good to challenge it a little bit, get it going if it feels stuck. Sometimes in my own kind of process, so to speak, I'll have memories from, like being a teenager, for example, and they'll be like, at that time in my life, I think I was pretty numb, and so to be able to, it'll just kind of like pop up like, oh man, this memory, like I totally didn't, like now I can feel the impact that at the time I was just kind of checked out, or like you talked about, like drugs and alcohol, like that kind of thing, so. Yeah.
That was your like brilliance of coping and like protecting yourself and taking care of yourself. That's what you knew to do then, and that was like brilliant. And
there's an intelligence in that.
Yeah.
And then there's a time and a place to stop that. I mean, I think if we had a more sane, healthier culture, like what you shared in your reading, or like around not engaging in, not doing these kinds of like drugs, alcohol, whatever, including I think psychedelics, like while your brain is still developing. And if we had a healthier, more sane culture, these things would be legal and available and able to be done in positive ways so that you could do them as an adult in a positive way. Like there wouldn't be this like pressure around it. And it's actually interesting that in states where cannabis has been legalized, the rate of use among teenagers has gone down. Because it's not so rebellious anymore. And it's kind of, if it's just available, it's not as, it loses some of that edge that the teenagers seem like they always want to go for the thing that they're not supposed to do. Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your spoken word with us. It was cool.
Yeah, it felt really good to share both of those.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It makes me, like, our conversation kind of makes me think about, like, another thing you mentioned is, like, you're getting near the age of 40, you know, that all this stuff we're talking about, like, you can discover and access, like, as an adult, like, in your 30s or 40s or 50s, like, I think our culture, I feel like I keep saying that, but there's this attitude that worships youth and young people, and then we think about, like, being wild, like, oh, that's what kids do. And that's like bullshit, right? Like anyone can access that.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be this idea that like you grow up and no longer play or are creative or have fun. Like that doesn't, we don't need to live our lives that way.
Yeah. And that's what inspired me a lot around the, you know, We Wild in how I picked the name, because there are different types of wild, and how can we get more in touch with that younger self in us that wants to go out and dance and play with our friends, that wants to, I mean, this says more about me, but that wants to go to the mountains and dance around naked, like, or, you know, it's just a different kind of wild. It's offering a different choice.
Yeah, it's like more conscious, more mindful, perhaps.
Yeah, I think a lot of women particularly, they come into their sexuality with not a lot of guidance, and it ends up coming out in ways that are not necessarily healthy for them or for the community. And so how wonderful it would be to, you know, teach women at a very young age, when they're teens even, or young women coming into their sexuality, that like you can still be in tune with your sensuality, your birthright of really being able to feel the world around you through your senses, which brings you into this aliveness. And when you do that, you are in your sensuality, which then, allows you to become more developed in your sexuality, because these are two very different things. And that's something that, we talk about in We Wild too, is the difference between sensuality and sexuality, and how in our culture they're so intertwined, but they're really quite different. So
that's a great distinction. I appreciate that. You can be in your senses, in your body, have a sense of enjoyment without it being sexualized or sexual. Totally, it totally makes sense.
And women are often sexualized when they are getting attention because of their sensuality, but they don't have a direct way of expressing it, if that makes sense. Like they're over sexualized because they're getting attention from others, and so they think that that's what they should focus on, when really, like, it's the sensuality that we should be reconnecting with, and really what's going to give us a sense of worth and pleasure, and allows us to own it. Like, it allows us to own it. It's not anyone else's. It's not something that you say that I have and that you admire from the outside. It's like something that you own and that you embody and that you get to experience. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. You can find that within yourself. And
Yeah. And
like, you don't need external attention, validation. Yeah, you said that a couple times, like getting like attention from the outside that can be like a drug, I guess. Like, it's drives a lot of behavior. Like, if you ever see something like really weird or dumb on social media, you could ask yourself, like, why they're doing that. Well, it's because they're getting attention. It's getting a response. It's getting the like button or the comment button or whatever.
And is that as fulfilling as doing it not for the attention, but doing it because it feels good to you? Like, which is more fulfilling? Having some integrity
and some intrinsic value. Totally. I think that's it's hopefully something that we collectively and individually can learn. But I feel like social media has kind of increased how our culture is like an adolescent culture. Like it kind of makes us all like one of the characteristics of being a teenager is like you're really concerned of what everyone else is thinking about you. Where do you sit in the cafeteria, and like who's the cool person and what are they wearing, and it's like social media just like turns us all into teenagers again. It
does.
Like, look, I'm eating at this restaurant, or I'm at this concert, or this all these posts, and it's so funny.
It makes me want to stop all of my social media.
I know, so many people say that. A lot of people I know will be like, I'm off Facebook for a month, and that's great, but for some reason it's really hard to like totally kick the habit.
But that's where it comes back to, like, I guess teaching everyone in the community to find it within themselves, and then post from there, I guess.
That's great. I like how social media connects us, and like feeling connected and knowing what people are up to. And maybe part of the way to work with it more mindfully that I haven't really done, honestly, is like curating who I'm friends with and who I'm seeing, the posts that I'm seeing. But I can literally sit down, like check in how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, open up Facebook, and within 3 to 5 minutes I feel worse than when I started. Like, I can observe that process happen to myself. And, I know I'm not alone in that. There's been a lot of research on it now, but it's weird how addictive and yet unsatisfying the whole thing is often. It doesn't have to be that way, but often it is. I'm having my own battles with social media this year because I, as a business owner, like you
you have to have a presence
Yeah.
in order to attract new people. And it's been a journey this year of like how much time I want to spend on social media, for that very reason that you just expressed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny world.
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest things I've seen recently on Facebook was like this long comment thread argument that kind of devolved into like one person trying to curse the other person. Like, but like not curse like a curse word, like they're like, we're trying to cast like a magical spell like through Facebook Medium. They're like, I'm putting a curse on you, and they like explain what they were doing. It's like, man, this has gotten way too far.
The magic of social media.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on the podcast. I hate to end on that note. Do you have any last thoughts for us?
Yeah. Let me tune in for a moment and see if there's anything else that wants to be shared. Yeah, there's one more thing. So I feel like it's important to share that, like, how to start working with me. So right now I'm offering a free workshop called How to Feel Deeply Nourished in 1 hour or less.
Nice.
And it's an opportunity for women to meet online and just get to know me and the other We Wild facilitators. And it's a gift. It's a gift that we're giving to the community, because I think we could all use it right now.
Yeah.
It's just like that nourishment and different ways of nourishing ourselves. And
That's beautiful.
And so I know you're gonna like share some links and your info.
Yeah,
and so one of the links I wanted to share was my Facebook group called Creative Conscious Connections. And that's where, you know, whoever is listening to the podcast who is interested in starting to work with me or just join this community that I'm starting, that's a great entry point, is this Facebook group.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely like that.
Yeah. So Creative Conscious Connections is the name of the Facebook group. So
that's a great offering.
Yeah. And that's where I'll be listing all the free mini workshops.
Cool. Are these in person or online?
They're online. Yeah. Which I'm actually enjoying because there's women coming from all over the world.
That's awesome.
There was someone from Malaysia.
Wow.
2 weeks ago.
That's
so
amazing,
that was,
right?
yeah,
That's
that
so
was
cool.
incredible. I don't even know how she found me. And the one thing I did want to mention about women, because I talk about working a lot with women, and that I want to be really clear, is anyone that identifies as a woman. So not just assigned female at birth, but anyone that identifies as a woman
is welcome to.
welcome.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's a good point to share. I feel like the word woman and man have become so politicized now. But,
which I was like really aware of when I picked the name of my business, of the program and just the wording of my website. But I think
it's valuable to have spaces where, like, just people who identify as women can gather and be supported and have that, and for men too, and for whatever gender. And it's not about excluding other people, but about creating a space for people who have that in common to connect and find support. Yeah. That's interesting. I've been a part of a number of men's groups, and with all the political stuff going on and different issues, but there's never been that I've personally seen like someone attacking that. I think people have, in fact, I've had the opposite, like women writing or messaging like, thank you so much for creating a men's group. Like, I wish my partner would go to this group, so there's been a like outpouring of support for things like that, because I think people can sense how healing it is, how helpful it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I had a guy reach out to me the other day and was like, I'm kind of bummed you're not offering this for guys. And So I admire the work that you're doing, and also anyone else that's offering groups for men together. It's really, really important work.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.